South Africa's Cape Town city is making headlines because of a severe water crisis threatening to cut off water supply to over 4 million people. But 11 other major cities could share the future. Take a look.
After a severe water crisis has hit South Africa's capital Cape Town, the drought-stricken city is expected to run completely out of water in 3 months. This date has been dubbed as Day Zero. Hundreds of Cape Town residents are now being forced to stand in long queues to stock up on whatever little water they can get their hands on.
I think there's going to be chaos. I mean, I hope Day Zero never comes, but I can see with people wanting to come here and the desperation for water. I think we're still going to realize that water is more valuable than oil. I don't want to be too critical, but I think better plans should have been put in place a long time already.
We use our shower water, which we put into the toilets, and of course we wash in a little basin, and we bucky wash when we take a shower. So that has been a major change for us.
But Cape Town, it seems, is just the tip of the iceberg. A quarter of the world's major cities are facing water shortages. 11 major cities are most likely going to run out of drinking water soon. Some of the cities are capitals while others are major financial or tourist hubs. But this does not make them immune to a looming water crisis. One of Brazil's biggest cities, Sao Paulo, is the most likely to run out of water in the near future. It went through a similar ordeal as Cape Town in 2015 when the main reservoir in Sao Paulo fell below the 4% capacity level. Taking the second spot is the Indian IT hub of Bengaluru. Not a single lake in the city is suitable for drinking or bathing due to severe water pollution. Toxic froth has become an all too familiar sight in Bengaluru's largest lakes, the Bangalore and Warthur. And believe it or not, last month a massive fire broke out in the Bangalore lake that raged for 7 hours. Property development projects and outdated drainage systems make matters worse for Bengaluru residents. Poor air quality is not the only issue Beijing residents have to deal with. China is home to almost 20% of the world's population but has only 7% of the world's fresh water. Official figures from 2015 showed that 40% of Beijing's surface water was polluted to the point of not being useful even for agriculture or industrial use. A surprising entry on the list is London. Though the city is known for its overcast and rainy weather, it gets only half the rainfall New York receives. London draws 80% of its water from rivers Thames and River Lea. The coastal city of Miami is a tropical paradise, but its seawater is the exact reason behind the looming water crisis. An early 20th century project to drain nearby swamps had an unforeseen result. Water from the Atlantic Ocean contaminated the Biscayne Aqua.
Joining me on the program to discuss more on this is Dr. Kevin Winters. He's the academic and lead researcher on the Future Water Institute at University of Cape Town. Also joining us is Ms. Limburg. She's a mayoral committee member of the Informal Settlements, Water and Waste Services, as well as Energy. And Mr. Mohandas Pai is the chairman of Manipal Global Education Institute in Bengaluru. Thank you all for joining us on the program. Coming to you first, Ms. Limburg. Cape Town is the first major city in the modern era to face the threat of running out of drinking water. How is Cape Town dealing with it right now?
Well, the city of Cape Town is doing all that it can to ensure that we don't run out of water. We've intensified demand management interventions in order to ensure that we can make the best use of 25% of water that's still currently available in our dams. And so we've done a range of things. We have introduced different water restrictions. We're currently on level 6D water restrictions, which requires residents to use no more than 50 litres per person per day. We've heightened the water tariffs as well to ensure demand patterns change around consumption. And we have constantly targeted higher consumers and installed water demand management devices on properties where there's high consumption. We've also reduced the pressure within the entire water reticulation system in order to further reduce consumption. And we've obviously also capacitated our leak repair program as well as our water complaints related inquiries to ensure that we can also minimize any potential water loss during this period of time. So all of these demand management intervention means we are driving down consumption to make the most to ensure that we don't run out of water.
Right, Ms. Limburg, according to a UN-endorsed projections, global demand for fresh water will exceed supply by 40% in the year 2030. Is Cape Town, or rather the world, prepared to deal with this?
Well, I think that Cape Town is doing all that it can to prepare for those very real realities around how our global environment is changing and how we need to adapt to it. So our water program in response to this drought is not about just managing the current crisis, but it's about building resilience for the future, ensuring that we can become water sustainable and water sensitive. And therefore, the city government is investing in its own water security to ensure that we can better manage this type of crisis in the event we do experience it in the future. As I indicated, the role of bulk water supply is that of national government, not of municipalities such as the city of Cape Town. But we believe, given this particular experience, we need to take action, and that's exactly what we are committed to doing.
Right, and Dr. Winter, over 1 billion people lack access to water. Another 2.7 billion find it scarce for at least 1 month of the year, according to a UN-endorsed projections that we were talking to Ms. Limburg about. And global demand for fresh water will exceed supply by 40% in the year 2030. And thanks to a combination of climate change, human action, and of course population growth. We see the statistics. Where do we go from here?
Well, thank you for your question, because I think this is what's beginning to really trouble the world. And we are at a point where we think we can still invest to a reasonable extent, particularly in developing countries, to be able to manage some of the infrastructure that's required. But in the long term, it's difficult to read what's going to happen. And so you spoke earlier on about these many cities that are facing severe threats around climate change, and how do you begin to invest infrastructure for these immediate, which is what Cape Town's going through right now, an immediate act of climate change in the cities. How do you do this for the long term? Because you can't plan for these 1 in 1,000 year droughts, as is the case in Cape Town at the moment. You can't develop capital and also have the resources to be able to manage these severe threats. So that's one of the difficulties. And if I can just add one more thing here, we've got to be so careful too, that as we invest in what is more supplies, which may not always be where the answer lies, but if we put more money into the supply side of things, the cost of water goes up higher. And that begins to exacerbate the inequalities and the fact that it puts a price on water, which cities with severe inequalities and the world with severe inequalities will be unable to tolerate.
Right, and Mr. Mohandas Pai, Bangalore is one of the 11 cities that are most likely to going to run out of drinking water, as we've seen from the reports that are emerging. Now, from seeing rapid growth of new property developments to the city's antiquated plumbing needs, now that's another problem in the city. A report by Bangalore Political Action Committee says that the current systems are incapable of keeping up with the growth of the city. Shouldn't the government wake up and smell the coffee before the crisis gets worse?
Well, I think the government is trying to do something, but let me give you the contours of what we have. Only 60% of the population gets piped water. The balance get it from tankers, which is groundwater and some stolen water. And only about, out of the 60%, only maybe 65% gets billed. The balance 35% is untraced or is lost. And we had about 200 tanks or lakes in the city. It's come down to about 36. Most of them are polluted, like you said. Bangalore gets rainfall of something like 80 to 90 centimeters a year, adequate rainfall. Even in drought years, it may come to 60. We have a old system of having lakes. The lakes have to be clean, groundwater has to be recharged, and we must cut down on the wastage. And if you do all these things, Bangalore can escape through. Bangalore's problem is a case of mismanagement of the entire water supply, compounded by a lack of adequate water in the river which supplies water to Bangalore, called Kaveri. In the last year, the Supreme Court of India asked the government of my state to share water with the neighboring state, and as a result, we had come to about 30 days of water in the dam, and if the rains had not come on time, it would have been disastrous for Bangalore. Yes, Bangalore has a management problem and a water scarcity problem, and I think the government is trying to do something, but the efforts are very, very inadequate at this point of time, and as citizens we are very concerned. We are pressurizing government to do more.
Mr. Pai, Bangalore makes news even when the Bengaluru lake catches fire. There's a hue and cry everywhere on how things are not being managed properly. The sewage is there, the sewer plants are not maintained, the groundwater is contaminated. That adds layers of problems to what Bangalore faces right now. Do you think only the Kaveri water issue actually sort of makes a way here, or there are other issues? Because the Supreme Court verdict is awaited. But then again, there are other problems that can be solved by governments and civil societies. Why do you think they're not solved yet?
Yes, I think they're not solved because government is not moving fast enough. What we have asked is, we asked for the lakes to be clean, at least 100 lakes to be clean, to allow sewage not to mix, to set up sewage treatment plants, and to make sure the water becomes clean. In response to what we have said, in 2 years' time, 100% of sewage in Bangalore of 1,500 million liters a day will be treated. And I think that will be very, very good, because if the water is treated fully in 2 years' time, we'll have a lot of brown water which can be given for industry, and pure water that goes to industry can be recharged. Government has taken that action. Right. And the Bengaluru lake burning happened because of methane gas. That area is filled with a lot of vegetable matter, and methane gas was generated there and it burst into flames. It was very funny to see a lake which was giving out a lot of foam, and a lake on fire because of methane gas. Government is trying to do its bit, and I think some civic activists are also protesting, not allowing the government to build some sewage treatment plants. But I think the government sees the problem and slightly more optimistic now than I was about a year ago. Well, then clearly you have to do more, and once the sewage treatment plant takes off, and once we make sure the lakes are clean, absolutely. Right. They have to do much, much more to clean up this matter. And the fact that it's coming, the BBC list says the world is worried, and I hope the government takes up action. And we're putting it as on the agenda of all the political parties who are fighting the elections in the next 4 months, that anybody coming to power has to tackle this with great intensity. Absolutely.
Interestingly, you pointed out that should be an agenda of the political parties next when they come out with their election manifestos, and in fact add this, because this is a problem and it's not going away. Also, Dr. Winter, here's an interesting example that's come out of Cape Town. Now, a couple, and in fact, this happened very recently. They said, you know, we know flushing in the toilets uses around 6 liters of water a day at a time. And they adopted a popular slogan. They said, if it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. Has it now come down to this? Apart from the government and the local bodies doing their work, shouldn't citizens also take measures to mitigate the crisis?
Well, I think citizens have done that incredibly well over the last 18 months especially. And so that example of how one manages flushing toilets, and let me just add, we're very few cities in the world, and Cape Town in South Africa is an example of these types of cities where we have very high quality water at potable drinking standards, and we use that to flush down the toilet. And so our ability to actually deal with treated water and to manage that effectively and to close the loop on the water cycle within the city is something that is only really beginning to emerge right now. But to come back to the citizens, they've been remarkable, both in actually meeting the demand and finding many different ways to adapt to the demand as the restrictions have brought down the levels of water on each occasion. And we've been tracing this, particularly in the social media, and watching the many ways in which citizens are both investing and putting in retrofitting mechanisms in their home. It really is a remarkable story in terms of any city having brought down the total water consumption in the city right down from 1.2 billion litres per day to around about 520 million litres.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Winters and Mr. Mohandas Pai, for joining us on the program.